I think this is also where right now there's the most immediate value to be had, because I think this is a pretty easy entry point, and I think it's also where a lot of operators just skip over entirely. And that's the thing I guess I'm trying to dispel, is it's never about handing over the success of your business. It's about bringing in a fully fledged C-suite role into your company for a couple dozen bucks per month.
So where would you start? If you're an operator, like, where would you start? AI is dominating the conversation, obviously, but what do you need to do in self-storage to actually make it useful, to clear out all this noise? What are things that you can actually do today? How do you do it? What's important and what's not? Alec, I've been seeing a lot of this. We're implementing heavily AI, but there just seems to be more confusion than anything else, especially with operators, where there's a lot of stuff they can be doing. There's also things they shouldn't be doing, right? That just don't have any use. So what are the main ways that self-storage operators today can be using AI or should be using AI to improve operations and to improve their overall selection, output, et cetera?
Yeah, I'm actually glad you kind of tagged on that second part of what should they be doing, right? Because I think there's a lot of ways in, our businesses, and even in our personal lives that we're seeing like AI being marketed to us. Here's what it can do, but I think a lot of that is the noise and trying to figure out exactly what you said. What should they be doing? And to be honest, I think I'll say most self-storage operators, but I could just say most people in general, haven't really used AI in any deeper of a level than asking to write an email. Or I was having some car issues the other day, and I was just talking to my mom about it, and she sent me this chat GPT message back, and where she had plugged in all the stuff I was talking about my car, and it's like, so things like that, and those are the
Yeah,
low hanging fruits of like what
like a
what are we
Google.
using it? Yeah, but I think now where should we be using it, and where is it going to provide us the most actual benefit to our business, to our operations? I think there's three buckets we can think of in self-storage. There is the AI piece that your tenants and your prospects touch directly, chatbots, voice agents. That's a big one. That's becoming pretty common. Answering after hours calls and things like that. And then how it embeds maybe in your booking flow or into your website for reservations and checkouts and so on. This is the most visible piece of AI, right? And I think this is like I put this first because I think that's where most people tend to go to primarily.
That customer interfacing part.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It handles volume, availability, but it doesn't really give you insight into the business. It doesn't really give you insight into operations, analytics, data, anything like that, right? Bucket number two is, extrapolating, building on that. How are you using it, or what are you doing to use it to run your business, to grow your business? Um, Pricing analysis, occupancy trends, churn patterns. This is the first level where AI becomes actually very useful of a tool. It starts being a chatbot or just something quite surface level and starts being an actual analyst. And I think this is also where right now there's the most immediate value to be had, because I think this is a pretty easy entry point, and I think it's also where a lot of operators just skip over entirely.
Yeah.
And then the last piece is, what is your team or what is your operation? How are they using it internally? And this can go back to, are you using it to help draft SOPs or training documents, marketing copy? Yes, emails, things like that. These are all, I would say, kind of low stakes, mostly focused on time saving. And I'd say this is also a really easy place to start, right? This is probably the easiest of all places to start, because this is the closest to what I was alluding to at the beginning, where it's conversational. You're having it draft something for you. You're maybe having it, research. You plug in a couple things, so on and so forth. So most operators are doing one of these three things. I think maybe a slightly more savvy operator might be doing two, but few are doing all three. And I think to truly bring the value in and figure out what's beneficial, to your business holistically, you kind of want to pull from all three.
So where would you start? If you're an operator, like, where would you start?
The best starting point is going from copy and paste to something that's more automated and something that it's a ladder, right? So building the framework there from basically where you're not starting from scratch each time. So, and I'll exactly that, right? Typing a prompt every single time you want to do something. This is what most people do, right? Hey, here's some thoughts, write an email based on this. Get beyond that first off, right? Figure out how to automate that. So, saving the instructions that you use, right? And there's ways in AI, and we won't get too far in the weeds into the how to do this. That's going to differ a lot from tool to tool to tool. But most of these tools allow you to set some fundamental rules. You set up a tone, you set up instructions, and then you can trigger that as you need, right? So maybe it is marketing copy. Maybe you put in some basics. Here's a general promotion I run. Here's our typical customer, and here's the channels that I use. You save all of that in there, and then every now and then you pop in, hey, we're doing a 4th of July promo. Draft me a Facebook post and an email copy. Hey, now it's Labor Day. Draft me the same thing, but update things like that, right? That's where we
Yeah.
can start to see some actual usefulness. And you're not copying and pasting. You're not starting from scratch. The tool that you're using has some fundamental knowledge of your business. It has some fundamental understanding of what you're doing. And you're loading that in, you're preloading all of that in your facility profile, right? Where you're located at, your average, your typical clientele, your policies, a tone guide. This is something that I think a lot of people don't even think about, but you spend a little bit of time in advance prepping a brand voice, right? And I guess if anybody's ever been through a larger kind of, we'll say marketing effort, one of the first things you do is create a brand guide, right? And
Yeah.
that might entail like your logo and your colors and how you can use the logo, the font you use, but it also will entail some things like we always use these words or we never refer to this thing or something like that. Doing the same thing but for your AI tool. So it understands what your brand is, what your facility is, what your operations are. And then beyond that, you get into some kind of the higher level things, and it's connecting AI to your actual data, your FMS. So it knows it's not guessing your occupancy, it's not guessing your rates, it's actually seeing real time what you're doing.
Yep.
And the last part, the most important part, going back to like, how do you add in these instructions? I think a big piece of that, you still want to always have a human level of interaction, right?
Yeah,
So
of course.
always having a check built in. And I think in the tool that I use, I actually have a literal line item at the very bottom that says, never assume anything, never guess anything. If you are guessing, tell me. And finally, always ask for confirmation before anything gets pushed or published or drafted or something.
Yeah.
So I think when you're looking at the framework and how you can kind of get started and thinking about this in an actual productive ways, those are the things you want to do. Setting up, again, just the instructions, voicing, brand guidance, getting as much of your real voice and your real facility and profile and operations in there as you can.
Yeah, I really think, we have two sides of this. You have the functionality of information, excuse me. So
Mm-hmm.
help me draw upon this knowledge, right? And figure out how to write emails, to do marketing, it is a brain that can help you pull from skills, data sets that you may not have, put it in. And that's where you need that foundation of information, who I am, where I'm at. So it has that ability to take all this knowledge, personalize it, and make it useful to you. Then you have the other side of AI, which is the action mode, that's like the doer.
Yeah.
That's where we have workflow. You're trying to condense workflow. You're having that actually do work, not just assist you, not be a knowledge base, right? And it's really those two functions
Right.
that have these different places within it. And I think a lot of people, they are using it at a base level of knowledge where they're Googling, asking questions, things like that, without that personal touch,
Without the
without,
context.
yeah, without context.
And if you're just interacting with it, and again, we'll say just ChatGPT, it's ubiquitous, but it could be anything. If you're just interacting with the stock version of ChatGPT without any of these things, what it gives back to you is very much the same thing it's giving back to anybody that's doing that, right? Which is why if you say in a vacuum, hey, write me a marketing email for my self-storage business with no context, it'll write you an email, sure, but it'll be the same email it would write somebody in Boise
Yep.
500 miles away from the nearest city, or somebody in Brooklyn, right? It doesn't matter. It'll give you kind of the same
And it'll look
generic.
AI generated because it's
Yes.
just a
And
basic.
then you spend more time fixing it than you actually would have, than it's saving you. So yeah, I think that's a great point, right? It's like creating that first point of, okay, well, if I'm going to be relying on this tool, as with any person that I bring into my business, the first thing is
Yes.
they have to learn about what my business is, who's making up my business, who's behind the business, who's on the other side of my facility, right? And then yeah, treating that as kind of a as fact. I
Yeah.
think that's the first pitfall.
AI is more front end work. It's not a lot, but it's
Yes.
just you have to prep it, get it ready. There needs to be a goal put into place. When you deal with the workflow part and the actions, that involves more connectivity, right?
Yeah.
What's it connected to? What is it doing? And a lot of that, we look at routine tasks. That really comes back to a lot of your customer interfacing. I think of lots of processing stuff that takes manual time. That's why customer interfacing and customer service is a lot of it. And you want to replace work hours.
Yeah.
So when I look at value on the workflow side, that connectivity part where we're condensing workflow, we're having outcomes done, I'm really viewing the savings in hours. How many hours, working hours of a person doing it are we saving, right? We're up to like 250 hours a month of actual work that AI is now doing for us.
Yeah.
That's easy to attribute value to, right? That's really easy to see. I think about it a lot like when online payments came out, right? You had a process for someone to come online, rent, pay, and get on. That saved time to where a manager would have to be doing lease, processing it, giving them the unit. They'd have to be taking that payment, everything else. So you immediately got rid of an hour per tenant, right? That's what
Yeah.
the online payments did. AI is the same thing. You're using technology to condense workflow, automate it, right? But you can just do it in way more parts of your business because it's not a single point.
That's a really good way to think about it, because I think one of the things that people get scared of is turning their business over, right? It's like, well, I
Yes.
don't want to hand off pieces of my success to this thing, this other third party. I don't know anything about it, right? And I agree with that. You shouldn't be doing that, which I
Yes.
think, just to bring that back around, that's the importance of setting up all of these things preemptively, so it's not a monolith that you're just handing things over to. So going back to, kind of those three buckets I alluded to, that's where we get into the second piece, which is like, what can we really be, where's AI best suited for? And I think personally, it's best suited at identifying trends and patterns, filling in those gaps, right? Way more so than it is at writing stuff. I mean, it can do that, and it can do that
Yeah.
pretty well sometimes. But I think the real strong suit of AI, and even just looking at kind of the biggest adoption of it, right, in developing and coding, it's all just pattern recognition and so on. And this is where, getting it tied into your real data becomes important. Think of it like you wouldn't just turn your operations, your revenue management over to a third party company that, only maybe they tend to only manage sites and portfolios in Southern California, but you're in Southern Illinois. You probably wouldn't expect to hand that over to them and then just to apply the exact same strategy that they use for Southern California to Southern Illinois and find
Yeah.
success, right? So that's where this can be really helpful, because now we're plugging in our real data. We're not trusting like an algorithm that we don't understand, because we're able to dictate and look at, our actual area and competitors and so on and so forth, plus our real data. And we can spot pricing gaps. We can look at our own churn patterns, tenant history. Where's our street rate versus our current tenant rate, and all of these things, like all of these things that are quite important, again, to the revenue piece and the actual management piece. And you can kind of dictate, well, I know that my gap between my average current tenant price and my street price is this. And while, a certain percentage difference might be acceptable for some regions, I know it's acceptable for my own region. So I can't just apply, across the board. If I just Google, hey, when should I raise rates? That answer is going to vary dramatically. But
Yes.
if you can start to identify the patterns with your own data, well, okay, I did price increases around this time 6 months ago and my churn was this. Maybe if I try. And that's where, again, we're finding time savings. We're finding these things that could be in the past might have been, pulling out spreadsheets and sorting through row after row after row. And now we're finding like, well, I have to just plug all that into my AI
Yeah.
system and it'll tell me all of that in a few seconds, right?
Exactly. There's a difference between general data and proprietary data. This is
Yeah.
why it's so important that you link up. Like I talk about my property management system. I need an open platform that I can plug into AI. We utilize a lot Tract IQ because I have Tract IQ plugged into Claude.
Yeah.
I can immediately jump in there and just ask it this city, this market, what are rate trends, everything else, match that up then to mine, and I can see, am I missing? When does occupancy go up, down, all of that kind of stuff. So it's the equivalent of hiring like an analyst.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
immediate, right? But that all
Exactly.
depends on the proprietary data. As in, are you able to get your data, your information? Is it plugged in? It's not general, right? But once
Yes.
you do that, it's now you have an on staff analyst
Yes.
where you can look at how do our financials change, what money comes in when, where are delinquencies, what units have what rates at what time, when should I raise them, right? All of that. That all comes back down to this information part of it.
Yeah.
And this is for small operators, this is revolutionary because once again, it is the equivalent of you hiring like a six-figure
Yeah.
analyst onto your team.
Yeah. And this is where things get exciting, right? And I'll go back to the kind of the third party, operational management side, because now it's like, well, sure, that's fine for some people. Some people don't want to do that. Some people like running their business, want to keep running their
Yep.
business. But now you're getting access to the same tool set in
Bingo.
theory that a large, multi-state, regional, whatever portfolio could provide you. And it's all about, again, so how are you getting your data into the system? There's lots of ways to do that. Most FMS systems are going to allow you to export. Great. You can export, plug it in there. You can copy and paste things. Now we're seeing a lot of the big softwares are just building direct connections to your AI tool. That's great. So however you're doing it, however you're getting the data into the system, step one, done. And then it's just a matter of building a library of prompts. And that's kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, where it's like, great, we need to, like you said, preload a lot of stuff, pre-work, not start from scratch every time. So we need to identify the most important prompts. To throw a few examples that I tend to always pull out, summarize churn patterns over X months. What are the most common, tenure links? Does anything stand out? And that's where we get into the pattern recognition, right? Well, hey, I noticed, and that it can tell you, I noticed you had a big uptick in move outs around this time last year. And then you could say, oh, well, that's when XYZ event happened. That's when the local, college semester ended and a bunch of people moved out of town because they graduated. So you can always exactly why these things tend to happen, which is invaluable. Or you can look at like, what are my unit types that have the highest occupancy percentage,
Yes.
and what are their pricing what is their pricing versus the rest of my portfolio? Which tenants are below the street rate, and how long have they been at that rate? And then based on what you know about your tenants and what you know about your market, now you can figure out, well, here's how I can increase, price here. Here's how I can reduce churn. And that's the thing I guess I'm trying to dispel is it's never about handing over the
Yes.
success of your business.
No.
I love that analogy used. It's about bringing in what in many cases would be a fully functional, a fully fledged C-suite role into your company for, a couple dozen bucks per month, depending on which tool and all these things. So.
Quick break from today's episode, everybody. I wanted to tell you about my favorite resources that come with self-storage income. So you may not know, but I wrote a book that's hard to even call this a book. I mean, this is a manual. We're talking 400 plus pages, which include all sorts of information about how we have been in the self-storage industry. That's everything from how we got our first deals, to scaling, to buying deals in today's market, what's changed and what remains the same.
This is an up-to-date book that shows you how the market has changed and how you can win today. This isn't simple, this is how you buy a deal. No, this goes into everything, including how you scale and create a self-storage business. You can get a physical copy, an ebook, or the audiobook, plus free access to bonus content at the end of each chapter. You can get it today. It's available on Amazon and other platforms in which you can follow the link.
Now let's talk about customer service.
Yeah.
How is AI, how are people using it to provide customer service? What's going on?
So layer one, right, that customer interface, what it does is it answers questions. It can help book your units, if it's a phone system, an AI phone answering system that's taking phone calls after hours. They've gotten very good. I've heard some that are quite improved over even just 3 or 4 months ago, to be honest. So it can answer questions about your site. Do you have this size unit available? What's the rate for that? Do you have any active promotions? After hours calls, booking your tenants without too much staff involvement, reducing volume of inquiries. And these are all things, to your point, that are saving your office manager or your site manager, whoever's would be handling that reservation or taking that phone call. That saves them
Back
time.
office, whoever.
Yeah. After hours move-ins right now,
Yep.
suddenly you have this whole world of 24/7 bookings, and depending on, your access and all of that, 24/7 move-ins even. So I think that's a big one, right? Missing an after hours move-in is a huge deal, right? You're not just moving the $50 for that month. You're missing 24, 36, 40, however many months of revenue
Yes.
that would have converted to.
You're increasing demand so you can increase your rates.
Correct. The chatbot piece, right? That's giving you, or the phone answering. I'll use that interchangeably, whether it's an actual chatbot or a phone answering service. That's giving you insight into what people are asking. Are they asking about, security? Are they asking about access hours, insurance options, climate control, right? This is giving, well, hey, I've only, I only have one building. I have 50 units that are climate controlled, but I'm getting, every other phone call somebody's asking about that. Maybe I'll look into buildings. So it's giving you insight into what the actual demand is, what people want in a way that you wouldn't maybe typically get through just a hands-off booking system where they might just be like, putting in their card, the reservation, which is great. Online reservations are great, but this is it opening up a whole new level of, dialogue almost. And it's important to also note, I think this is also one of the scariest points for a lot of people, the idea of your customer interacting with a non-human.
Yes.
I think whenever I'm, at shows and events this comes up, that's always the biggest pushback is like, I know I want to talk to people. I know my people want to talk to people. And I feel the same personally, right? Like I hate when I have to go through I'm the guy that's hammering 0 on the answering system just to get through to a person. So it's about using these tactfully and intelligently and knowing how the tool functions and knowing the use case.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people have that preconception of, like I was just saying, well, I just hammer a button to get through to a person. Well, yeah, but you're probably typically calling your insurance company or your doctor's office or these things that have a lot higher stakes, right? Somebody who's wanting to book a unit, they're probably very content to just get through that process as quickly as possible, get their questions answered, and be done with it.
They just want the unit.
Yeah, they want the unit. They want to move in as quickly as they can.
That's
it. In most cases, they're looking at 3 or 4 different places. They've Googled or they've searched or whatever, storage near me, and they've got 4 places within a couple blocks pulled up. And the first and easiest one to book that meets their criteria is what they're going to book. So I think that's where, you're seeing that first layer of customer interaction come in. But what it can't do is based on that data that's coming in, based on all these inquiries and these questions that are being asked, it can't extrapolate, well, it sounds like everybody's asking about security cameras, so I need to install some security cameras, right? Those are still the human decisions that have to be made based on, what you're seeing.
Okay, so now we've talked about these 3 buckets, right, going on. How do you see this, though, changing storage operations, its impact overall? I mean, we've talked about what it's doing today, the amount of time saved, how operators can be using it both on an information side, workflow side. Where is this going though for self-storage, and what do you think this is going to look like for operators in the years to come?
Yeah, so I think the biggest part is kind of what you were alluding to earlier, and it's the fact that it just opens up so many new tools and so much opportunity for the average owner operator. It allows you to make better, more informed decisions faster. It allows you to more consistency. The advantage will compound. So I think the easy answer to that, and if I'm being like blunt, the cheap answer to that is like, oh well, it'll give you more time because it's going to reduce the calls and it's going to help, and that's true. But I think that's kind of underselling the real value. And I think the big value in how this changes the industry is it takes what used to be knowledge and workflows and insight that was only available to the REITs or to large management companies or to otherwise things that were just never really accessible to your average small portfolio owner operator. Now they have access to all of that. They have access to the same level of decision making skill and capability, and that's born through this much wider range of knowledge and insight that they're getting. So how's it going to change? I think a lot of ways. Like I said, the easy answer, we're going to see some reduced customer interactions and so on and so forth. It'll change how we book units and reserve units. But the biggest benefit I think that the change will bring is exactly that: faster decisions, better decisions, more consistency. And it just brings this asset to your business that otherwise, historically you never would have been able to have.
Yeah, it's shocking to me that things that Extra Space was doing 10 years ago, independent operators now have access to, which would have been unimaginable. The resources that it allows for usage of your own data, which you had to have powerful software tools
And somebody that knew how to use them.
and somebody that knew how to use them to
Yeah.
even get close. You had to have high paid people, analysts. You had to have, research people, market analysis done that you can have done today. And I think that if you're looking at AI, there's a few things we talked about: the information, right? The analyzing part, the workflow to actually help with operations. But you brought this up, and I do want to go back to it. It is a data game, meaning it is limited by what you can input it. Data is the most important thing in today's age because the tools and ability AI can do, but it is constrained by what you can give it. And if you are doing it if you're not giving it the information, the data, everything that it needs, it has both eyes or both arms tied behind its back, right? Like
Yeah.
there's nothing you could do. And setting that up is probably the most important part. And, once again, we're talking downloading stuff, even market summaries, especially getting started. It's better to have it connected, which is really easy to do. Like if you go into, whether that's Direct IQ, Hummingbird, anything else, to just go and literally plug in the codes and allow, it will automatically do it. And you can give it access to it. And then you get access to all of that data, both yours and the market data. Those two things combined, that's powerful stuff. Analyzing markets you're looking into, analyzing your own asset. And all of this goes back to reducing expenses, but optimizing your revenue per square foot. That creates value. And you can do it in a way that is automated and streamlined. So you're actually lowering work, increasing revenue per square foot, reducing expenses, and that is powerful.
Yeah. So think about it, or I guess how I think about it is the AI tool is something you should own, right? And whether it's your Claude account, your Chat GPT account, whatever, that is your tool, your asset. And I think it's important, and let's just call it like a layer, right? This intelligence layer belongs to you. it is universal, it is constant, and it's portable. So whatever other tools you might go out and experiment with, try, whether that's a management software, whether that's a revenue management tool, whether that's, yeah, unit track, humming, whatever. Uh, those can all, be interchangeable, but the source of truth and this intelligent piece that you have trained, going back to all of the stuff around, building these guidelines, building this voice structure, that's universal, that's constant.
Yes.
So you can replace and plug and play and experiment with all these different things. But your skill, your prompt, your automation, constant. You're not rebuilding it every time. And that's an important caveat here because that's why when we see so many organizations, softwares building in their own AI tools, that's great. And there's value in that. But at the end of the day, you're still always constrained to that tool for that piece of your tech stack, right?
Yep.
And the other part is that tool, the engineers and the developers, they built it for, I don't know, you don't know as the operator, you don't know what was the input, what was the data they were feeding into it to train it based on, well, hey, if AI, we have this built-in AI pricing tool that's going to tell me when I should change prices. Well, based on what rules, based on what market,
Yeah.
based on what data set. So that's why there's a kind of a catch with all of this, which is I say anytime you have a chance to own that and keep control over that piece, that layer, that's vital. That is the non-negotiable, I think, because otherwise you're always recreating, rebuilding, and at the mercy of, again, to your point, whatever data was fed into it. And as you said, that is the most important part. You don't want to have to start from scratch every single time you're trying to access this or interface with this.
Exactly. You want an operating system that is yours and that you can run and that has the ability to execute. And the great thing about it is that it builds. The longer you use, the more information it gets, the more it understands your organization, what you want, what you're trying to achieve, the asset, the market, the customers. It gets better and better and better, and more optionality opens up. But if you are constrained to those outward things, it doesn't compound like that. It doesn't grow. You're starting over every time, and you're not building for the future. You're not building something that is scalable, something you can grow off of. With AI, it allows you to have that operational ability, that knowledge base to grow, to scale. And that is very exciting.
Yeah. And I want to be very aware of not just talking over people's heads or anything, because I understand all of this can be a little like overwhelming to try and digest. So I think when we talk about the data that you put into it, it's helpful to break it down into a couple levels. And, so like level one, I think is the tone and the voice, the facility profile, your brand guidelines, what language you use, like that kind of very basic stuff
Yeah.
that you would, again, you probably know all of those answers already. You know what words you like to use and how you like to structure it. And layer two or level two, this is more based on like use case, right? And this is where interchangeability. So, your pricing sheets and active promotions, any policies, your FAQ for your tenants, escalation protocols. When do things get flagged? When do things get flagged for human intervention? So for example, like in a lot of AI tools, like chatbots and the voice answering systems, you'll be able to preload like, what are like some red flag indicators, at which point the system will immediately, okay, we're switching you to a human now, we're pulling this now, making sure you understand all of that. And then the last part is like, well, how are we now making use of all of that? So like your benchmarks, the overview of your portfolio, summaries of your competitors, things like that. So when we talk about data, I think there's different levels of that, different tiers of that, and they all have their own importance and they're all kind of used in different functions.
Two, you mentioned though, like what data things, I can't overstate this because I was doing this a lot as AI was developing and coming out. Nobody really knew, right, and understood how to use it. So instead, I just went directly to the source. What can you do? Asking AI. What can you do? What do you need? So I own a storage facility. It's in this market. I tell all the basics. How can you help me optimize rental revenue per square foot? What can you tell me about my facility? And what do you need to do those things? And what do you need to answer those questions? And it'll give you a list. Give it the information.
Yeah.
Do what it tells you to do. Optimize that and run it. It'll actually tell you what to do. And so a lot of people are like, well, I need somebody else, or I need to hire somebody. Well, first of all, maybe for more complex stuff and everything, but getting started, you can just ask.
That's such a good
That's
point.
it.
Yeah.
And it will literally help you.
And that's one thing I'm glad that you brought that up, because as we talk about like how do we make useful prompts and how do we like kind of elevate from like, 0 to 1 and 1.5 and 2, you can ask AI like, help me create a prompt that will do this, this, or this, right? Help me write a prompt that will, like you said, improve my revenue, over the next 6 months. And I'll tell you, well, can you please give me all your price? So yes, that's a great point. You can just ask it a lot of the time, how to use it better, how to interact with it better, what does it need? And it's great at doing that. Same idea. You can explain, right? Like, hey, I'm trying to create a brand voice. I want it to inform you how you can write as my brand and not just a generic brand. What do you need? And it'll tell you, well, you should tell me, what words do you like to use? Who's your average consumer, et cetera, et cetera. You answer a few questions and then it will generate the prompt. So I know it sounds very circular in some ways, but it is quite good at that. I think I found it's very useful to rely on this to kind of dictate some of the getting the ball rolling, right? Because otherwise you're kind of just overwhelmed with information. You don't know even where to start. But it's good at kind of honing down and identifying that.
Exactly. I don't want people to overcomplicate it. Like any technology, it's just utilizing and figuring out. But unlike any technology, you never had Excel be able to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
Excel couldn't do it, tell you what to do, tell you how to improve, what you need, what your business needs, right? This can. And so I think you first need to increase your familiarity. Like, you should be using AI every day. It would shock me if there was a business owner and operator that didn't use AI basically every day. Because my question would be, why? Right? Like, oh, I don't need it. You don't need it. You don't need help. You don't need better answers. You don't need information. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. That having a powerful tool and just being like, I'm fine. Right. Like it should be, with operators, CEOs of businesses that I own and have CEOs in, it is on their screen all day.
Yeah.
All day. And they are using it. It's cutting workflow down, everything else. So becoming familiarized with the tool, how to talk to it, how it talks with you, what it can do, that's just the first thing. Just literally play around. Say, hey, I'd love for you to analyze my business. Here's my rent rolls. Here's my location. What do you see that's good? What do you see that's bad? Question it, challenge it, and utilize it that way. And then as you move along, it learns about you, your business, and it can get progressively more. It's not something that you just need to do day one. In fact, that's not something you should do.
Yeah.
You should see how it fits with you, your culture, your company, your employees, your asset, your location, on and on and on and on. And so just experience and utilizing it. The more you do, the more intuitive it becomes, the more you will understand it and the opportunities that are there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why this conversation felt, so important, is because it is here to stay. Yeah. How and what ways it's here to stay, that's still to be determined, both by the larger, forces at play in the market, but also by the individuals. But it is here to stay. So I don't necessarily think it's safe to just write that off entirely and say, well, it's not for me. I would say that is more of a reaction to some of those entry-level pieces, which is why I say you don't necessarily, we can bypass the user AI interaction altogether if you never want to expose your customers to that, right? And that's fine. That's a fair decision if you make that. but that doesn't negate the usefulness of the tool in other areas of your business, or vice versa. Maybe you think, well, I'm never going to need this to help me with my pricing strategies, but it can answer for the phone after hours. That's also fine. Like you said,
Yep.
it's about you exploring that and figuring out what's the best fit for your business. But then the other thing that comes into mind is a lot of the usefulness is going to come from feeding information back into it. So one like useful thing to do is, if to use the easy example, if you're using it to write an email, have it write the email, you rewrite that email in your own words, your
Yes.
own voice, your own tone, put that back in there, tell it, hey, this is how I would write that. You do that enough times, it picks up on your voice. One thing I did just as an experiment with my own was, from when I was doing my master's degree, I took a lot of my school papers and put it in there and asked it to kind of analyze and tell me, like, based on these writing styles, what would you guess about how I write my sentence structure? And it gave me this long thing like, well, you like to use sentences of varying lengths, or you like so on and so forth. It can discern all of that. So again, I just say that to illustrate, feed the information back into it. If you are using it to suggest pricing strategies, say, okay, great, I took X, Y, but I'm not going to do Z. And remember that for next time. And it will not suggest Z next time. You know what I mean?
One of the ways that I think about this is in 2000, 8, 9, I was spending a lot of time convincing storage owners and operators, speaking, everything else, about why a website was important. The pushback was actually extreme. In 2018, 19, I was trying to convince people of online rentals. And there was huge pushback, extreme pushback. Now we're trying to convince people with AI. What we found was the adopters online vastly blew past everybody else. The adopters of online rentals blew past. Then by the time you got to online rentals, having a website was not only a given, it was necessary, and everybody accepted that, right? And it's funny to actually say that out loud today. That sounds ridiculous to say that out loud today, but you have to remember that's how it was. And the thing about it is what you mentioned. It's not going anywhere. And two, I view it as it's not about you. It's about your customers. It's about the business and it's about the market. This is what people didn't understand about websites than online rentals. They're like, I don't need that. That's not important. Like, well, it doesn't matter what you want. Your customers do.
Yeah.
And so when I look at AI and AI adoption, being slow to adopt it just means you're falling behind everybody else, just like all the previous iterations, because the business model evolves. AI is not leaving. It's not going anywhere. So business models will. Third parties adopt, integrate. You participate less and less in the ability to operate with modern trends and coming up. Customers are now searching and utilizing AI for rentals, just like they did Google. So you not participating in that just means you don't participate in that part of the market. Well, when do we get to a point where the vast majority of online rentals are now coming from AI, right? That will happen. Google's already adopted AI, right? These things are already happening. So for people that look at this as, some people honestly look at it as like a gimmick, blows my mind. It's infrastructure based. Third parties, everybody's using it. All competitors are going to be using it. It's just like you ending up operating like a facility that was operating in 2018 without a website and online rentals.
And the other thing is, you've been in the industry longer than I have. You could probably speak to the specifics of this more, but things only accelerate, right? The changes only happen faster and faster, right? So things that 20 years ago, change might have been a little more incremental and slow than versus 15, 10, 5 years ago. So I was at a conference not long ago. I believe it was my state show here in Arizona. Somebody was giving a talk on where online rentals are coming from. And I think they said something along the lines of like, from their research, less than 2% of current rentals were coming through an AI tool, meaning asking ChatGPT, I need to book a storage unit. Where is that? And then it gives you less than 2%. And then something like 40 some odd percent was still coming through phone calls.
Mhm.
And I don't push back against that at all, but I will be very eager to see in a few more months when we hit 12 months from that conference those same numbers, because I would wager the farm that those numbers will start swinging more and more and more and more. So you're right, it's definitely one of those cases of, if you don't kind of adopt it, it might not seem like a big deal because we're still in a very early stage here, but that's only going to just explode and move faster and faster. That 1% will be 20% before you know
Exactly.
it.
And a lot of people think about it as, this is why I go back to, this is infrastructure. So the internet was infrastructure, just like retail was infrastructure to sell products, right? You put your product in retail and you come in. That's what people missed. AI is the same thing. It is a processing infrastructure. So adoption comes because things are built off of the infrastructure. So it's not something that it's like, I either don't like it, like the market doesn't care. Customers don't care whether you like it or adopt it. You just either fall behind or you adopt and you change. And you'll either be forced to or go out of business, or you can be ahead of it and you can operate. What happens when you can't buy deals anymore because your operations can't underwrite and they can't pay at that kind of expense load exposures? You can't do this. You're not quick enough. You're not fast enough. Then all of a sudden your deal pipeline breaks down. You're not competitive in the market anymore. The same with getting people in the door, servicing, everything else. People may say, oh, they don't like AI. We have an AI company and product we're rolling out does off-market deals. AI is calling owners. The owners don't even know. I listen to the calls. They don't even know it's AI.
Yeah.
That can run 24/7 all the time, never ending. There's not a person to it, so we can do way more. Service calls coming in. People don't like to work with machines. And you think a call center is that much better. Well, what happens when you don't have all the call center problems? And guess what? They can't tell that it's AI.
Yeah.
Because we are getting so close to the point now where the vast majority of people have no idea it's AI. When you can't even tell that it's not AI, there's no friction there.
And that's actually funny you point that out, because that's the thing I say when the AI phone answer, I say, people don't like call centers either. People don't like the idea that they're talking to somebody in some other state, some other country, wherever,
No,
that's
they
not
hate it.
attached to they don't like that either. So the consumers don't like a lot of things. You're right.
Yeah. Press one. I would rather talk to an AI agent than get on there and press
Have to
one
press through.
for this option, press three
Yeah.
for this. And I'm 10 minutes pressing
Yeah.
buttons, trying to get someone to help me. I'm like, just get somebody to help me. If
Yeah.
that's an AI that pops on and can talk to me and help me, I don't care.
And address the issue
I
much
just want the
faster.
issue addressed and taken
I
care
want
of.
it fixed. I want my overdue invoice paid, or whatever.
Exactly.
Which is, again, just to kind of, I don't want to harp on this, but I think it is important. That's why I'm trying to more and more think about this as a layer, right? I'll just use that term because I think that's the best way. It is a layer that sits on top of your business in any different way you want it, whether it's customer interfacing, revenue, internal projects, whatever. It's a tool. It's a layer that can be used in different ways, and it is molded to your business in the same way that you go to the podiatrist because you have some foot pain and they give you a custom insole, right? It is built for your foot to alleviate the specific needs of you and your walking style and your gait. The AI layer is the same. It is built for your business to alleviate the issues that you're facing and that only you're facing. And if you tell me that that's not useful, then I just don't believe you. Like you said, so you don't have any problems with your business. You don't have anything that can be improved. There's no decisions that are, served by having access to a wealth of data and patterns and history. I just don't believe it.
It's shocking that that happens and we hear it and know about it. As
Yeah.
a market participant, any advantage that you have, you should take it, and you need to realize that the advantages your competitors have. REITs are adopting this at mass, and they were already powerful. If you want to compete, you need to be better. Self-storage has changed. It is not what it was 15 years ago. And if you want to play in this market, you need to be able to compete better. AI came in and that is the biggest help to individual operators, single mom and pop owners, or people getting into the business that there has ever been. It narrowed that competitive gap. It is the greatest advantage that you have against REITs or anything else. And ignoring that is wild to me, because it closes that gap and it allows you to make more money, to grow, compete, be in the business, and not have the business just consolidate. So use it, everybody, and get familiar with it, because it doesn't matter if you do or not. The market is, it's not going anywhere. The only one that you hurt by saying, I don't like AI or I'm not going to use AI, is you. No one else. It's just you.
And treat it like an employee. Train it first.
Treat it like an employee, not a software system.
Yes. Don't dive in and say, what's wrong with why am I underperforming? No, give it the context, train it to your business first, because otherwise, like you said, you're going to ask it something. It's going to give you a generic answer because that's all it knows. And then you're going to say, well, this sucks. Throw the baby out the bathwater. So yes, use it, train it first, let it understand you, understand how to make that happen. Ask it the questions on how to train it if you need to, like you said, and you'll figure it out. Like from there, it is remarkably accessible if you just do a little bit of due diligence and upfront setup, as you would with any new entity you bring into your business, new hire, new software, whatever. You're always going to spend some time onboarding that, training that, learning that, and vice versa.
Exactly. Well, man, hey, we could talk about this all day. I really appreciate it. This is really important. It's changing so fast. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. If you're not participating in it now, what it is in 6 months, what it is in a year, you're going to just feel more and more behind. But where can people get a hold of you, find out if they'd like to talk to you more about this? Where should we send people?
Check me out on LinkedIn. Or send me an email, Alec, ALEC, @Storeganise.com. We actually have a really cool, completely agnostic tool that we give to new operators. It's a training program for AI, basically. It's a training for the operator. It gives you a library of prompts, no strings attached. It's just completely open to the public. Reach out. I can send you that. It can kind of show you how you write some of these things, how you can start creating better prompts. And yeah, glad to share. I think it's important for the industry, and I want as many people to have the information as possible.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. And those links are in the bio, everybody. And we'll talk soon. Appreciate it, man. Thanks.
Cheers.